Welcome into TYT's The Conversation. It's your host, Adrienne Lawrence. And today I am joined by Kimberly Leonard, who covers politics for The Insider. Thanks for joining us, Kimberly.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, so there's been a lot going on there where you are based, Florida, and particularly when it concerns this whole kind of crime voting team that's gonna make sure people aren't breaching voting rights. What is going on?
That's right. The legislature just sent a bill to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis that would establish a new Office of Election Crimes and Security. And basically, this office is supposed to be investigating allegations of fraud. They're going to have a hotline, and they're going to sort of proactively go after any reported incidences that they hear about. There's a $2.5 million budget for this office. That's less than the governor had requested. He requested $6 million, but it is something that he asked the legislature for specifically.
Yes, and so I know he really wanted this whole department to be really gung-ho in terms of eliminating voter fraud. And voter fraud's been a hot topic, but also it's really been kind of a non-existent one when you consider how often voter fraud goes on. But it definitely seems to be something that spawned out of the 2020 presidential election and that big lie that has been spawned by Trump. So I guess, how are Florida citizens responding to the fact that you're using so much of their budget to attack voter fraud when it's really not warranted?
Florida is one of those states that's going to be really interesting to watch because it has always been this huge battleground state. Ron DeSantis barely won the state when he ran for governor last, but he seems to be pretty confident about his reelection chances this time around. Really, legislation ideas that are more favorable, and he, has to win in Florida in order to eventually run for president someday. And although he has not said that's his intention, everyone is sort of expecting that that is in fact the case, given that he has all these high profile national Republican issues that he's tackling. And so even though he had said that the 2020 election went off without a hitch, he still said that this office was necessary. And I think part of that was because he was sort of caught in the middle between, some of these allegations that former President Trump is making, and then others who wanted him to do an audit and be more aggressive. But he wanted to say, no, the state went toward Trump. It was fine. Everything was good this time around, and we're getting ready for the future instead.
Yes, and in terms of the future, as you kind of noted, the thought is that Ron DeSantis may go ahead and run for that 2024 presidential race, which may not necessarily be, welcome in terms of many individuals throughout the rest of the nation, because Florida seems to be passing this legislation it seems to be hampering and encroaching on a few rights. But I guess, what's the sentiment there in terms of allowing that man to continue to elevate himself in the ascension?
Well, whatever he's doing seems to be working for him now, at least as far as the Florida governorship is going, just because polling shows that among Republicans, he's highly favored. His fundraising is off the charts. It's unusual for a governor. And there was even a straw poll at a recent conservative conference that found that he was edging up to former President Donald Trump, and that if former President Trump doesn't run in 2024, that he would be the favorite. And he always points. Governor DeSantis always points to the fact that there are tons of people moving to Florida. I think it'll be really interesting to see whether those folks who have migrated to the Sunshine State are sticking with the voting patterns that they had in previous states, which might have been more Democratic aligned, or if they move to Florida because they see themselves more as conservative Republican voters.
So with these voting laws in place that seem to be very restrictive, and that's being something that Florida is moving more toward, I guess, they sound good and all, but what is the worst thing that could happen?
One of the things that probably both sides should be concerned about is whether voters will actually trust in the integrity of elections. Because when laws like this get passed, there's a lot of accusations that fly around about voter suppression. And then people will wonder, well, gee, is it worth me even going to the ballot box? And so there's that sort of chilling effect that could happen where people wonder about whether the right person has been elected. Let's not forget there's a governor's race this year. We're in the middle of a midterm election. And Florida is known for recounts, as we all know. And so being able to have confidence is really the bottom line of what everyone should be concerned about.
Yes, and it seems that's to be somewhat odd that now they've amped up the criminal penalties with this new law in terms of, I think there was an aspect of not being able to take in another person's ballot if it's more than one person. Can you explain that?
Yes, that was another controversial piece of the law. So it essentially bans what they call, quote, ballot harvesting. And that would mean that if you are someone who is dropping off a ballot on behalf of someone else, whether because they're physically limited or something like that, you could be facing a felony. Previously, the law called it a misdemeanor. And so under the new law, it's a $50,000 fine potentially. It's up to 5 years in prison. And so this could harm voters who can't access the ballots themselves. Generally, you have churches or community centers who try to assist people with voting. And so that really cuts off those opportunities.
Absolutely, and it would seem to limit individuals, as you notice, who don't have just ready access to drop it off, whether they're in senior living facilities or maybe they're working or childcare issues. So it seems to limit people who aren't readily mobile. And I'm guessing that the demographics of people who take advantage of this ballot harvesting are largely members of the Democratic Party. Is that accurate?
Well, not necessarily. It can be voters of color, many of whom do vote for Democrats, but there is some shift, particularly in the Latino community, in terms of voting more Republican. So, I think that a lot of folks would, for example, point to Virginia and saying that they had very few voter restrictions and they elected a Republican for governor there. And so, even though making elections more accessible gets framed often as creating terms that are more favorable to Democrats, that isn't necessarily the case. And that's why voting rights advocates say that this should be a nonpartisan issue.
Yes, I would definitely think it'd be a nonpartisan issue, as the goal should be to get as many people to voice their vote as possible. But it really seems like DeSantis and co are doing everything they can to silence voters. And in that same regard, I guess the possibility that DeSantis could make his way to the White House, again, I'd love to kind of explore this in terms of, do you actually think that this is something that could come to pass, given the angles he's taken in Florida in terms of the laws and the restrictions there? Do you think it's really welcome to the rest of the nation?
Well, the polling seems to indicate that it is. One of the things that Governor DeSantis has done well is that he has sort of framed himself as the, foil to the Biden administration, and has framed Florida as, ready to punch back against restrictions during COVID and things like that. And so he's also really, really welcomed by base Republicans, which I know don't necessarily represent the whole party, but that was a strategy that worked well for Trump. There are a lot of folks, certainly in Republican circles, that expect that if former President Donald Trump does not seek the White House, that Ron DeSantis not only could, but should. And that's kind of the feeling behind looking at 2024 if you talk to a lot of Republican strategists.
No, it sounds like my nightmare. Even the possibility of a Trump DeSantis ticket, but I won't even go ahead and go there. But I will definitely ask you, for the viewers out there who are looking to follow your work, Kimberly, where can they find you on social media?
Thank you. I'm at Leonard KL on Twitter, and I often tweet about what's happening on Capitol Hill as well as down here in Florida, where I live.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Kimberly Leonard. She covers politics for Insider.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.